Chances are that if you clicked on this video, then you've probably played Pokemon Black and White before. These games released over 10 years ago now, and over time they've become one of the more appreciated Pokemon games by fans, especially over the last year or so. I really love the 5th generation era of Pokemon in general, and a lot of my favorite Pokemon happen to be from this era. I have a ton of 5th generation Pokemon stuff, from the cards, a few plushies, and even this official Pokemon Black and White strategy guide. Today, we're going to try to beat Pokemon Black and White by following this guide as closely as possible and see if it really is the best way to beat these games. Consider leaving a like on the video as well and subscribing, since it helps the channel a ton, especially since we're getting so close to that 100,000 subscriber mark. So let's begin by taking a look at this guide that I have. I got it from a used bookstore, and the first thing I noticed is what looks like residue from a band-aid on the cover. That's pretty gross, and I don't know why or how it's there, since the book itself is in pretty good condition outside of this weird cover. You may also notice that at the top of the cover it says Volume 1, but I did get Volume 2 as well, which is just the Pokedex, level up moveset, and details some extra features like the Battle Subway. I also kind of accidentally bought it because I thought it was Black and White 2's guide based off the description that I read online. Volume 2 is in much worse condition than Volume 1, as the corners of the page look like they were dunked in a pool or something, and we might have to reference Volume 2 a little bit here and there depending on what we need. I also noticed that this guide doesn't have the official Nintendo seal on the cover, although it was published by the Pokemon Company and is the official guide apparently. I guess this is more as Pokemon intended rather than as Nintendo intended then. But the Pokemon Company is owned by Nintendo, so I guess in the end it all leads back to Nintendo somehow. I read a little deeper though and saw that Prima Games, the company responsible for the legendary Fire Red and Leaf Green guide we looked at, also worked on this guide. Typically, Prima only worked on unofficial guides that were then licensed by Nintendo, but seeing them work on a guide in an official capacity is pretty cool. Now, finally getting into the actual book, it has a lot more information before the actual walkthrough starts. Between Volume 1 and 2, this guide has much more information than any other guide we've looked at so far. It details all the daily events, all of the key trainers, although for some reason it refers to Hilbert and Hilda as just boy and girl, a type advantage chart, and just about everything you would need to know if this is your first time playing through Pokemon in Volume 1. Since that's what we're trying to emulate with this entire Nintendo Intended series, I think that's pretty good. It even has a recommended route that we can follow, similar to the checklist we saw in the Diamond and Pearl guide. Seeing as this is the most modern guide we've looked at as well, it isn't surprising that it has the most useful information and pretty much no mistakes that I've noticed so far. I read through most of the beginning of the guide and made it all the way up to page 56, where the actual gameplay walkthrough starts, and it doesn't end until page 164, and then Volume 1 continues on to page 256, covering some other things in the game in the postgame. To put some things into perspective, the entire Nintendo Power Diamond and Pearl guide is only 175 pages, and in that guide has a lot of the things that Volume 2 of Black and White has, while Volume 2 is 352 pages. With all that out of the way, let's finally load up our copy of Pokemon White and hammer away at it so we can beat Pokemon Black and White as Nintended. As the game loads up, we see Professor Juniper and have the typical intro for any other Pokemon game. I decide to pick the girl character since I don't think I've ever picked the girl character in all of the times that I played Black and White. I also just named my character Girl since according to the guide, that's her name apparently. This takes us into the actual game where we meet Sharon and Bianca in our room and get to pick our starter Pokemon. The guide doesn't really say too much about the starters outside of their types and abilities, but earlier on in the guide it does mention how you can build a team around each starter to cover their weaknesses and give some example Pokemon that you can use. It doesn't really give too much information about them still and doesn't really say which one is the best or which one is the worst, so I just picked Tepig. I like all of these starters a lot. I didn't really have much of a reason to choose Tepig, but after I pick it we have to battle Bianca and her Snivy, and the guide tells me that there's no difference in power between our Pokemon, so don't worry, just fight. Just fight is exactly what I end up doing to defeat her. Then we fight Sharon and his Oshawott and go all out like the guide says. The next thing we have to do is get the X Transceiver, which I think is supposed to be called the Cross Transceiver since the guide specifically says Cross Transceiver in parentheses next to X Transceiver. The next objective tells us to watch TV when we head downstairs, and all it tells us is that Mold Breaker is a good ability. I'm not really sure why we had to do this or what the point was, but I do all of the other small things we have to do in Unova Town, and name Tepig subscribe. The guide also outlines return events in each area that we have to do later on in the game, like get some TMs from Professor Juniper depending on how many Pokemon we've seen in our Pokedex. It writes "seen" in all caps like that, which I thought was kind of funny, but it probably does that just because that's how it's written in the Pokedex in all caps. This then brings us to Route 1, where we take our first steps into the Pokemon world with our friends, get 5 Pokeballs, and then use those Pokeballs to catch as many Pokemon as possible since the guide told me to. I caught 2 Lillipups and 2 Patrats since 1 Pokeball missed, and end up giving them random names since I don't think I'll be using them too much. Having repeat Pokemon might seem a little weird too, but since this is supposed to emulate my first time ever playing Pokemon, it kind of does make sense, especially since when I first played the red version as a kid, I did have 2 Starmies on my team for some reason. Next, we go to Akamola Town and meet Team Plasma, and have a quick battle with the mysterious trainer known as N. The guide says, quote, "If you battle calmly, you should win this battle." I'm not really sure what that means or how we can battle calmly, but I end up winning anyway. It then wants us to go into this one house and talk to this pianist and a drummer, which apparently add those instruments to the soundtrack in the background of the game. I never knew about this, and it might be hard to hear in the background, but it does change the music a little bit. I noticed a few other instances like this later on in the guide too, where it tells me things about this game that I didn't even know, and I've played through Black and White so many times before. This leads us into Route 2, where we get the running shoes, level up our Tepig a little bit, and have a battle against Bianca where I was able to dispatch her rather quickly. Now we're in Striaton City, the home of the first gym badge. We can't enter the gym yet, and have to visit the trainer school first in order to be able to challenge the gym, but before we go to the trainer school, the guide highly recommends that we go to the Dream Yard first in order to get a new Pokemon that will help us later on. The guide then wants us to skip 4 pages ahead to detail the Dream Yard a bit more, where we get the Grass-type Pokemon Pansage since our starter Pokemon was the Fire-type Tepig. I named Pansage Sprout, then flip back to page 69 to battle our childhood friend Sharon. I'm not sure why the guide didn't just stick the Dream Yard pages here instead, because I think it would have made more sense, but it's common for guides like this to require us to flip back and forth a little bit. I defeated Sharon in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, and now we can finally challenge the first gym leader. The guide doesn't really say too much about the gym, other than which of the 3 gym leaders you'll be facing, since the gym leader you face depends on which starter you picked, and what type their Pokemon are weak against. It recommends that we save our new Pokemon that we just got in the Dream Yard against the gym leader's ace Pokemon, in this case the water-type Panpour, since our new Pokemon can type Trumpet since it's a grass type. I do this and end up getting the first badge rather quickly. After this, we have a few small things to do for Fenno involving getting the Seager and the Dream Mist, save this Musharna from Team Plasma, and then get the Pal Pad and have a brief explanation of Pokemon Black and White's online feature, which unfortunately had their official server shut down back in 2014. The guide also makes this note about how we have to use Cut in the Dream Yard, and says only 2 of the 3 starter Pokemon can use Cut. It says if you started with Tepig, like we did, that we should catch a Patra and teach it Cut, so I also did that as well, not like it really makes that much of a difference. Now we have to travel through Route 3, with the first thing we pass by being the daycare. The guide suggests that we leave a Pokemon here, so I left one of the random Route 1 Pokemon I caught here, and we can also put a second Pokemon here if we wanted to later on after we get the bike. After that, I hammer away at another Charon fight. There's a lot of random rival battles in this game, by the way, and help this girl who was bothered by Team Plasma in the Wellspring Cave. I also had no idea this cave was called the Wellspring Cave until just now. Roggenrola can be found in this cave too, so I caught one and named it Geo since Roggenrola happens to be one of the recommended Pokemon to use if you started with a Tepig like we did, along with Pansage, which you already have. This brings us to Nasreen City, and on the way Tepig evolves into Pignite, which is very useful since it now gets the fighting typing. There's a few small things we can do here, like see our Pokemon's friendship level if we want to, and get a charcoal item, but the main draw to this city is Lenora and her fighting type Pokemon gym in the museum. I head towards the gym/museum first, battle N, and the guide actually recommends specific types for this battle, and I have 2 of the 3 recommended types so far. The only types that I don't have are Flying or Psychic, which it recommends for his fighting type Pokemon, but maybe later on we can find another Flying type that we can use Fly on, or possibly a cool Psychic type. After defeating N though, I go inside the gym, solve the bookshelf puzzle, and face Lenora, and lose on my first try because Retaliate on her Watchog is just too strong. I did a Nuzlocke of this game just a couple of months ago, and I remember beating her on my first try, and I didn't even start with Tepig, which is arguably the best starter for her, so I'm kind of surprised that I lost on the first try. I try again though, and I lost again because I kept getting hit by Hypnosis, Thankfully, Charon gave us some chesto berries right before the battle, but that still wasn't enough. And then I go in for a third attempt, and this time I save my fighting type Pignite for a little bit later in the fight, since the guide recommends I use fighting types against her Watchog for this gym. I get lucky with arm thrust on her Watchog and get a lot of hits each time I go for it, finally getting the second gym badge. After I get the badge, we're alerted that Team Plasma stole the dragon skull from the museum in the gym, and we're tasked with tracking it down and bringing it back. We have to go to the Pinwheel Forest now, and on the way we also meet Bianca, who gives us the Dowsing Machine, or Dowsing Machine because it's just spelled M-C-H-N, which is basically just this game's item finder with a different name. Right before we enter the Pinwheel Forest, I noticed something about a smashing rock challenge in the guide. Turns out that there's this one rock you can smash if you have a fighting type Pokemon on your team. You don't even need to know Rock Smash, and get a star piece which can be sold for a lot of money. I end up doing this, and now we can sell that to buy some more Great Balls, which I used to catch a random Pidove that I caught on my way and named it right, since I noticed a couple of times in the guide where it suggested that I used the flying type Pokemon before. I then clear out Team Plasma from the forest and retrieve the stolen Dragon Skull pretty quickly, then go across the Sky Arrow Bridge where I pick up the Quick Claw along the way, and into Castalia City, which is so big that it takes up 2 full pages in the guide where it shows the map. There's a ton we can do here, like pick up a Leaf Stone for our Pansage, which I'll use later on since according to volume 2 of the guide, Pansage learns a couple of decent moves pretty soon. This is also the first time that I'm actually using volume 2 of the guide, so I guess it wasn't a complete waste of a purchase. Then we register Zora in our Pokedex by reading this book, visit the Game Freak office in Castalia, get the TM for Flash, get a bonus EXP share from this random janitor in this one building, help this guy form a dance group, strangely enough, and finally head into the gym where we meet Charon and Berg. We have to run around and stop Team Plasma after this before we can actually challenge Berg though, since they stole Bianca's Muna, I don't know how to say that. After rescuing it, we can finally head into Berg's bug type gym and hammer away for the third gym badge. I use Subscribe on his Venipede since it's a fire type like the guide recommends, then I switch in Geo on his Dwebble since the guide recommends I use rock type moves against it since it's weak to rock. I gave Geo the EXP share we just got as well, so it's leveling up pretty quickly, and now all we have to dispatch is Berg's Levany. The guide says how if you don't have any of the recommended types for this gym, you could always use Flash, which is an effective tactic, apparently, to lower their accuracy. I didn't really need to do this, but I did it anyway since I thought it would be pretty funny, so I taught Flash to Sprout before finishing off Berg's team with Pignite, giving us the third gym badge in the Unova region. Now we have to head north to Nimbasa City through the Desert Resort. On the way we meet our rivals in Juniper for another fight, and we can skip the Desert Resort for now since the guide says we have to return back here later to do most of the events here. It still details all the events on this page anyway, but we'll just flip back later on. Now as soon as we get to Nimbasa City, we have to help this old man who is being harassed by Team Plasma, and we get a bike out of it for helping him. Bianca then comes out of nowhere and tells us about the musicals in this town, which we'll have to visit sometime soon, and I also get the Versus Recorder, which is a pretty useless item for us right now since we're not going to be doing any online battles. There's a few small things we can do in Nimbasa City, like dress up our Pignite as a beach tennis player, but the first important thing we have to do here is go to the amusement park and meet N, where he tells us that he's actually the king of Team Plasma, and then he challenges us to a battle. I have all of the types needed to cover his team since the trio of Pignite, Bulldor, and Simisage, the latter two recently evolved, are just too strong. Now we can finally challenge Elisa and her electric type Pokemon gym. I think this is one of the most annoying gyms in all of Pokemon since she spams Volt Switch and her Pokemon have the ability Static to paralyze us. I luckily have Geo here, which is a rock type Pokemon with a ground type move as well, just like the guide suggests that I use, and I'm able to type trump all 3 of her Pokemon for the victory. I had to rely on Subscribe the Pignite a little bit to heal since the paralyzes were getting pretty annoying, but now we can head west onto Route 5 and progress in the story. Before we do that though, the next page after that details Anvil Town, a totally optional town that we have access to from the trains in Nimbasa. I go there even though we don't really have to, and there really isn't anything for us to do yet. Headed back towards Route 5, we have another fight against Charon, we meet the champion Alder, and we gain access to the Driftveil drawbridge so we can head to Driftveil City. There's also this random page about Pokemon that can learn field moves, basically detailing which Pokemon are the best HM slaves in the game. Not sure why it's randomly stuck here this late in the guide, but I guess it's still good to know. There's a few things to explore once we get to Driftveil though, like the market where you can buy a dozen Moo Moo Milks, and then we have to head south into the cold storage to clear out Team Plasma since they're hiding out down there. The guide suggests that I battle all of the trainers here and catch some Pokemon since there's some rare ones here, so I caught a Vanillite that I'll probably never use and name it Ben. After doing all of that and clearing out Team Plasma, I head back to Driftveil to fight Clay for the 5th gym badge. In this section about the gym fight here, I noticed that it has big green text detailing which types inflict the greatest damage to Clay's ground type Pokemon. Something that the guide didn't do for any other gym up until now. I also noticed that there's a recommended level for Clay's gym fight too, something that the guide actually did have for every other gym up until this point, and I'm only now noticing it once we got here. The recommended level here is level 34, which is quite higher than Clay's Pokemon, but since I have a team that matches up so well against his Pokemon, and I was able to get through every other gym despite being slightly lower than the recommended level, I head into the gym fight anyway. Pignite does great against his lead Krokorok, then our recently evolved Sprout takes care of the rest of his team with Seed Bomb. The guide does recommend specific moves here as well, like Grass Knot and Scald, both of which would have been pretty good for this fight, but the guide never specifically mentioned how to get these moves, and now that I think about it, the guide doesn't specifically outline where many of the items are, aside from just giving you a list for what items are found in each area. Other guides that we've looked at for Pokemon games would go out of their way to make sure you pick up some useful items like some of these good TMs, but not this one for some reason. As I exit the gym, I head to the next route where we meet Bianca for another quick fight, and she gives us the HM for Fly that we can use later on. This same route has some Funguses that you can catch that are disguised as Pokeballs, but the guide makes no mention of those either for some reason. On the same route though, I catch a Deerling and show it to the researchers since the guide said to. We don't get anything out of showing them a Deerling, but now we can go through the Chargestone Cave in order to get to the next town. I ran into a wild Pokemon every 2 steps going through the cave, but on the way we're also given a lucky egg from Professor Juniper and have a fight against N right at the exit, where his team matches up terribly against a Pignite as it's all weak to fire and fighting, and the guide recommends that I use fighting or fire types against his entire team. This brings us into Misralton City, home of the 6th gym leader Skyla. We meet Professor Juniper's father here, Cedric Juniper, and then Skyla tells us how she's going into the top of the Celestial Tower up north, so we have to go follow her and meet her at the top of the tower. There isn't really anything much to detail in the actual tower itself besides the fact that I leveled up a lot of my Pokemon, but on the way to the tower, I stopped by one of the houses and noticed there was an in-game trade here for an Emolga if I traded them a Bulldor. Now I didn't want to trade the Bulldor that I had on my team already, so I went back and caught another Bulldor in the Chargestone Cave to trade for this Emolga. The excerpt that I read about Skyla's gym here recommended that we use electric type Pokemon, so this will certainly do. After that, I level up the Emolga and meet Skyla at the top of the tower, then go back to her gym and meet her for the battle. The recommended level here is level 38, and my Emolga meets that level finally, so I use it in order to get a pretty quick victory and the 6th gym badge. As I head out of the gym, we meet N, who tells us about his plan to find a legendary dragon-type Pokemon, and then we have to go into Twist Mountain to go to the next town. Twist Mountain is one of my least favorite areas in all of Pokemon since I hate caves and there's so many trainers here. It also happens to be the place where I lost my first ever Nuzlocke back in like 2011. But we do get the HM for Surf from Alder here, and we do have another Charon fight which I dispatch rather quickly yet again. The next page randomly showcases Route 17, 18, and the P2 Laboratory, which are optional areas located near Unova Town, nowhere near where we are right now. I'm not sure why they just stuck this in here since we're supposed to be in Icarus City, but then the page after that shows the Misralton Cave, which is another random optional area we don't have to be right now. The page after that finally shows Icarus City, where we can get a second EXP share here from the Pokemon Fan Club, and take this quiz where I know that the answer was attack since it asked me which type is boosted by the protein item, but there's so many options that it gives here that I couldn't find the right one, so I answered incorrectly and still get a Paralyzed Heal as a prize out of it. If I answered correctly, I would have got an antidote instead. Now with all of those minor things out of the way, we can take on Bryson, the Ice-type gym leader. The recommended level here is level 42, and luckily our Subscribe, which recently evolved into Emboar, meets that level, as well as 2 of the recommended types for this gym being Fire and Fighting against Bryson's Ice-type Pokemon. Emboar does well to start off the battle, but gets confused and faints from a Swagger from Beartic. So I go into the Rock-type Pokemon Geo to clean up the rest of his team since the guide says that Rock moves are also very good here. And with that, we got the 7th gym badge, meaning we are so close to beating Pokemon Black and White as Nintended, as there's not much of the game left. As I exit the gym, we're greeted by our friends as well as the Shadow Triad from Team Plasma, who tell us that we have to go to the Dragon Spiral Tower. Right before that though, there's a page about a few of the in-game trades in the Unova region randomly placed here for some reason. This seems like something that would be best placed right before the actual walkthrough portion of the guide or right at the end of the guide, but I guess if you really wanted to randomly get get an in-game trade like for this Rotom, you can go do that now if you wanted to. I know there's quite a few out of place pages I've mentioned in the guide so far, but kinda weird how we have so many so close together now. As I go into the Dragon Spiral Tower, I noticed the guide mention how it's said to be the oldest structure in all of the Unova region. I like these little facts that the guide throws in here and there every now and then because I haven't really noticed that in other guides we've looked at so far. I head up the tower and through a couple of the puzzles, and for one of the puzzles the guide says, quote, "Don't get frustrated, just think about which direction you're going and you can reach the stairs to the 4th floor." I thought that was a little bit funny to put in there, and I also think it's a little weird how the guide doesn't show direct paths or anything like that for these puzzles, but goes out of its way to show where each trainer is located and what their names are, but not what's on their team, when that really isn't that important. I make it to the top of the tower anyway, where we learn more about Team Plasma and N's plan to use the legendary Dragon-type Pokemon in these games, and eventually N gets Zekrom, parentheses, Reshiram as the guide puts it, since it depends on which version of the game you're playing. Now we have to backtrack in the Unova region and go back about 50 pages in the guide as well to go to the Desert Resort to fight Team Plasma there again, and on the way we also get a fossil and learn about one of Alder's Pokemon that actually died from an illness in the past. This is one of the very few instances in Pokemon where a very specific trainer's Pokemon is said to be dead, and it happens to be the champion of the Unova region. After hammering away at Team Plasma in the desert though, we can now head onto Route 9 where Shopping Mall 9 is located. This is one of my favorite big stores in all of Pokemon, so to say, although for some reason the guide makes no mention about how you can change your Rotom's form here by going to the back room of the mall. I don't end up buying anything at the mall here though, so I just head out and go to Opalucid City. This is a unique city in Pokemon Black and White, since each version has a slightly different aesthetic to it, so the guide actually has 2 different sections about Opalucid City for each version, even though the majority of the events here are the exact same. The biggest difference is that the gym leader in Pokemon Black version is Drayden, while in White version it's Iris, but they have the exact same team in each version of the game, and the description the guide has for both of the fights is nearly identical. A little while ago I also started up leveling up Ben the Vanillite we caught by giving the XP share, and since I have the lucky egg it actually leveled up quite a bit. It should come in handy here though, since it's an ice type Pokemon, which is the recommended type for Iris's gym or Drayden's if you're playing Black version. I end up leveling it up to level 46, which was the recommended level, and it also evolved in that time and learned the move Ice Beam, so I'm able to just use Ice Beam 3 or 4 times to get the victory against Iris. This gives us our 8th and final gym badge, putting us so close to beating the game. I have a pretty diverse team of Pokemon as well, which I notice at this point, many of which are also Pokemon I have never used personally while playing through Pokemon Black and White, like Emolga, Simisage, and Vanillite. I do some other minor things here like meet Thundurus, who caused a storm, and get the Master Ball from Juniper, but after that we can also head through the Victory Road into the Elite Four, which I think will match up pretty nicely against all the trainers there. The guide has a chart that shows how to get through Victory Road that was pretty easy to follow, and there really isn't anything too special to note in Victory Road besides the fact that there were a lot of trainer battles. I eventually make it all the way to the top and into the actual Victory Road area and level up some of my Pokemon in the process. I noticed that the recommended levels for each of the Elite Four members is 53, so I grind my entire team, besides the Pidove I've just been using for Fly, to about level 53. Typically I would only have 1 or 2 Pokemon at the recommended level for each gym fight, but since this is the Elite Four and it's the final dance so to say, I thought it made sense to have my entire team of 5 Pokemon to at least around 53. I read through some of the descriptions as well for some of the Elite Four fights and noticed that it seems like flying type moves and dark type moves are especially good here, so I expect Emolga and Simisage to do well here since they both have flying and dark type moves. Before heading into any of the Elite Four battles, I stock up on healing items and notice this part of the guide that mentions how Caitlyn, the Psychic type Elite Four trainer, also appears in Pokemon Heart Gold and Pokemon Soul Silver before she became the Elite Four member in the Unova region. This is another little cool Pokemon fact that a lot of people didn't know that the guide likes to throw in every now and then. The guide then lists the 4 Elite Four members in order from left to right, as you can battle them in any order you want in this game, so I battle them in the same order that the guide has them listed. First is Chantal, the Ghost type Pokemon trainer. The guide recommends dark type moves, so I lead with Simisage as it's my only Pokemon with a dark type move in Bite, but it falls pretty quickly to her Cofagrigus. For the Elite Four members, the guide also lists what other types are super effective against Pokemon they have on their team though, making it pretty helpful since I was able to use Emolga on her Jellicent and Geo on her Chandelure to knock them out for super effective damage. This was still a pretty difficult fight though, especially compared to the gym leaders in Unova, which are much easier compared to gym leaders in other Pokemon games. I'm able to get through her though thanks to just using brute force with my other Pokemon, and now I have to go take on Grimsley and his dark type Pokemon. The battle goes on much smoother than the last one because his Pokemon are all weak to fighting type. Thankfully I have Emboar, although I did have to revive my Emboar again for this fight. Now whenever I use healing items in battle like this in videos, whether it's a Nuzlocke or not, people tend to get annoyed by it for some reason. Not sure why people would expect me to just not use healing items in battle, especially when the guide specifically suggests it. But so far the revive item has definitely been the MVP of this Elite Four run. After laying waste to Grimsley's team, we have to battle the Psychic type trainer Caitlyn next. I have the least amount of coverage options for her, but surprisingly I have an easier time against her than I do with Chantal. At one point her Gothitelle was left on 1 HP before knocking out my Pokemon, so I went into Right just to quick attack it for a guaranteed knockout. Since Right was so low leveled, since I really only use it for Fly up until this point, it gained 5 levels from that and actually evolved from it, which also meant that as of now, all 6 of our team members have contributed to an Elite Four knockout. After we defeated Caitlyn, we now have to take on Marshall, the fighting type trainer and the final member of the Elite Four. Emolga really shines here with acrobatics, although I did have to revive it again before I'm able to finish off his team. This was probably the easiest of the 4 because Emolga was just so strong here, but now we can finally head into the champions room to face Alder. However, it turns out that N just defeated him moments before we were able to find him. This leads us into N's castle, which appears out of nowhere, with a bunch of Team Plasma members around, including the 7 Sages. Luckily, the gym leaders of Unova all come out to help us against the 7 Sages, except for Chili, Cress, and Silent from the first gym. The guide even references this and says that Bianca went to go get those gym leaders, but they didn't make it back in time to help. I then make my way all the way through the castle to the top where we learn more about N and how Ghetsis raised him, and how Team Plasma's plan to liberate Pokemon was just a front, while their real goal was to take over the Pokemon world. Like, who would have guessed that? Even N was fooled by this, causing him to feel betrayed by Team Plasma and Ghetsis. But right before we're about to battle N, we get the chance to capture Zekrom and add it right to our party. So I just immediately throw the Master Ball at it and replace Right in our team with it since it lets us add it to our team right now. Now we can finally battle N, who has a pretty diverse team, although we can hit all of his team for their weaknesses. I lead with our newly caught Zekrom and then shuffle in new Pokemon after each knockout and spam heals. And luckily I defeat N a little bit easier than I was able to defeat some other Elite Four members. After our battle, Ghetsis then appears again, the man pulling Team Plasma's strings as the guide puts it, where we learn a little bit more about his plan and his history with Team Plasma, and the guide also randomly notes how N and Ghetsis have the same last name being Harmonia. Kind of ironic how a man who just tried to take over the world has the last name that sounds so much like the word harmony, but he then challenges us to a battle as well. Ghetsis has arguably one of the strongest teams for any boss fight in any Pokemon game, with Pokemon like Bisharp and his illegal level 54 Hydreigon, as Hydreigon isn't supposed to evolve until a later level. This battle was certainly a challenge, but luckily I was able to finish off most of his Pokemon with Simisage, interestingly enough, giving us the victory. Shortly after the battle, the credits roll, and with that, we beat Pokemon Black and White as Nintendo intended, or as Nintended. I want to give a huge shout out again to Mystery Or for inspiring this series with his original Minecraft video, and to each and every one of you for watching and supporting my channel. This is one of the most fun Nintended videos I've ever made, since I really enjoy playing through Pokemon Black and White. Overall, this guide was great though. It detailed a lot of cool facts and random secrets that even I didn't know about, but I didn't notice too many funny or weird things in this guide or any mistakes at all. In case you're wondering, I do plan on making an Nintended video on Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 eventually. I just have to get my hands on the guide, and I'll most likely be playing Pokemon White 2 for that one. Dr. Lava reached out to me to let me know that he asked Takao Uno, the director of the Generation 5 Pokemon games, which version he would recommend playing, Black 2 or White 2 for people who played Black and White 1. And he told me that they recommend that if you played White version, that you should play White 2 version so you can experience all of the differences. So if you made it this far in the video, consider leaving a like, as one like does go a long way, and subscribe for more Pokemon videos. With all that out of the way, I also want to thank you all so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you all next time, and bye bye.